The silence in our Oak Park home wasn't the peaceful kind. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a storm about to break. I was sitting in my favorite leather chair, the one that smelled of aged mahogany and the dozens of blueprints I'd pored over late at night. Outside, the Chicago wind was whipping through the leafless branches of the oaks, scratching against the window pane like something trying to get in. Then the front door clicked. Vanessa walked in, but she didn't drop her keys into the ceramic bowl like she usually did. She held a manila envelope like a weapon, her knuckles white against the paper. She didn't take off her coat, a charcoal wool piece that cost more than my first car. She just stood there, framed by the entryway, looking at me with a coldness that would have frozen the lake. Without a word, she tossed the envelope onto the coffee table. It landed with a dull thud that felt louder than a gunshot. "I'm done, Mark. I'm done with this marriage. The papers are signed. I want you out by the end of the week." I didn't flinch. I didn't shout. I didn't ask why, like a man whose world had just collapsed. I looked down at the bold lettering at the top of the page, "Petition for dissolution of marriage." And then I looked up at her, and I smiled. Not a smirk of malice, but a slow, steady smile of someone who had been waiting for the final piece of a puzzle to fall into place. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. Welcome to Family Secrets and Revenge. Yes, to our neighbors in our manicured cul-de-sac, Vanessa and I were the gold standard of the American dream. I was a senior architect at a top-tier firm in downtown Chicago, a man who spent his days designing skyscrapers that defined the skyline. Vanessa was a rising star in luxury real estate, the kind of woman who could sell a glass house to a stone thrower. We had the sprawling lawn that was always a perfect shade of emerald, the black European SUV in the driveway, and the annual summer parties where the wine flowed as freely as the compliments. But behind those heavy oak doors, the foundation had been rotting for years. It started small, a missed dinner here, a late night at the office there. Vanessa had become a ghost in her own home, or rather, I had become an invisible man in mine. She stopped asking about my day 3 years ago, around the time she made senior partner. By last year, she had stopped looking me in the eye altogether. We lived in a 5,000 square foot museum of a house, two strangers passing each other in the hallways, curated by a woman who valued optics over intimacy. The real shift, the moment the hairline fractures appeared in our marriage, started when Vanessa began handling the high-rise initiative. It was a massive development project in Seattle, and she was supposedly the lead consultant. She was spending 4 nights a week away. When she was home, she was glued to an encrypted messaging app, her phone face down on the nightstand. One evening, she came home later than usual. The scent of expensive cigars and a specific woodsy cologne, sandalwood and arrogance, began to cling to her silk coats. It was a scent that definitely wasn't mine. I'm a cedar and spice kind of guy. This was something darker, something that smelled like old money and bad intentions. I watched her hang that coat up, her movements hurried, her eyes darting to me briefly before she retreated to the master suite. I didn't confront her. In my line of work, you don't call out a structural flaw until you've surveyed the entire site and mapped the stress points. I knew the collapse was coming. I just needed to make sure I wasn't under the debris when it happened. I began to notice a recurring name in her digital footprint: Julian Thorne. In the world of real estate development, Thorne was a name whispered with a mix of respect and genuine fear. He was known for aggressive acquisitions, a polite way of saying he destroyed lives to build parking lots. I realized Vanessa wasn't just working for him. She was being acquired by him. The evidence didn't come from a grand confession, but from the mundane slips of a woman who thought she was too smart to be caught. I found a receipt tucked into the lining of a luxury handbag she'd treated herself to. It was from a boutique jeweler in downtown Seattle, a city she had supposedly visited only for dry board meetings. The receipt was for a $12,000 diamond tennis bracelet. I checked our joint account history. No such purchase existed. The next morning, as she sipped her kale smoothie, I saw it. There it was, sparkling under the recessed kitchen lights, a cold, hard weight on her wrist that I hadn't bought her. She didn't even try to hide it. She thought I was too broken, too complacent to notice. Most men in my position would have hired a cheap private investigator to snap grainy photos of her entering a hotel. But I'm an architect. I know how to read blueprints, and I know that the most important parts of a structure are the ones hidden behind the drywall. I started my own investigation. I began tracking the business expenses Vanessa was claiming on our tax returns. It turned out she had been funneling small, unnoticeable amounts of our shared savings, increments of $2,000 and $3,000, into a private offshore account for nearly 18 months. She was preparing for a life without me long before she ever reached for that manila envelope. She thought she was being clever, playing a high-stakes game of financial chess. What she didn't realize was that I had installed a secondary, invisible firewall on our home network months ago. In every email, every transfer, every hushed VoIP call was being logged on a drive she didn't know existed. I was building a case that would do more than just end a marriage. It would end a legacy. The true betrayal, however, wasn't the affair. It was the greed. One rainy Tuesday, while Vanessa was supposedly at a closing in the Gold Coast, I took a personal day. I didn't go to the office. Instead, I drove 40 miles to a small, nondescript storage facility on the outskirts of Naperville. I had found a spare key hidden in the false bottom of her vanity weeks earlier. Inside that storage unit, it wasn't old furniture or seasonal clothes. It was a collection of meticulously organized files, legal documents regarding my family's estate in rural Vermont. My grandfather had left me 400 acres of worthless woodland years ago. Vanessa had been secretly working with Julian Thorne to have that land rezoned for a massive luxury resort and casino project. They had already lobbied the local council in secret. The dirt I owned was suddenly worth $20 million, and Vanessa was planning to divorce me and claim 50% of it as a marital asset before I even knew I was a multimillionaire. So when she stood there in our living room in Oak Park, telling me she was done, I smiled. She thought she was holding the winning hand. She thought the divorce would trigger a discovery process where she'd walk away with the house, half my retirement, and $10 million worth of Vermont soil. Shown what she didn't know, what her expensive lawyers hadn't told her because they didn't have the updated deeds, was that I had already transferred the Vermont property into a blind, irrevocable trust for my younger sister's specialized medical care. I had done it 3 weeks prior, citing family heritage protection. The assets Vanessa was counting on to fund her new life with Thorne were legally untouchable. The smile was for the irony. She was divorcing a man she thought was a millionaire, only to realize she was leaving with nothing but the debt she'd accumulated. "Why are you smiling?" Vanessa hissed. Her composure, usually as polished as a marble countertop, was finally cracking. The silence of the room seemed to amplify her irritation. "Did you hear me, Mark? I'm leaving you. I'm moving on to someone who actually has an ambition that matches mine. Someone who isn't content just drawing lines on paper all day." I stood up slowly, the leather of my chair creaking. I tucked the divorce papers under my arm with the casualness of a man holding a Sunday newspaper. I walked toward the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, the ice clinking against the glass. "I heard you, Vanessa. I'm just happy we're finally on the same page. You want a new life, and honestly, I've been craving a fresh start for a long time too. I just didn't want to be the one to break your heart. I'm glad you're doing the heavy lifting for me." Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one. If you were in Mark's shoes, realizing your spouse was trying to steal your family's legacy, would you have kept your cool like he did? Vanessa didn't waste any time. True to her ruthless nature, she had a professional moving truck backed into our driveway within 48 hours. She wasn't just taking her clothes, she was stripping the house. She took the mid-century modern furniture we'd picked out in Italy, the art pieces from the gallery in River North, and even the $4,000 espresso machine I'd bought her for our 5th anniversary. I sat on the front porch of our home, a simple mug of coffee in my hand, watching the movers haul away the physical remnants of a decade-long lie. Then a silver Porsche pulled up to the curb. Julian Thorne didn't even have the decency to get out. He just sat behind the wheel, sunglasses on, and honked the horn like he was picking up a pizza. Vanessa didn't look back. She didn't offer a final wave or a moment of regret. She stepped into that car thinking she was heading toward a kingdom. She had no idea she was actually heading toward a legal and financial minefield I had spent months preparing. A week after the moving trucks cleared out the echoes of our marriage, the real battle began. We met in a high-rise conference room in downtown Chicago, a space of glass and steel that overlooked the churning gray waters of Lake Michigan. Vanessa walked in looking like a widow who had already inherited the fortune. She was draped in designer silk. Her lawyer, a man named Henderson, who was known for being a bloodhound in divorce court, trailing behind her with a briefcase that looked like it held a bomb. And they sat across from me and my attorney, Sarah. Henderson didn't waste time with pleasantries. He opened a folder and began listing their demands with a predatory gleam in his eye. They wanted the Oak Park house, 60% of my liquid assets, and equitable distribution of my family's holdings. Vanessa sat there tapping her manicured nails on the mahogany table, looking at me as if I were a bug she had finally managed to scrape off her shoe. She was so sure of herself. She had Thorne's money behind her, and she thought she had the leverage of the Vermont land. Sarah let Henderson finish his long-winded speech about lifestyle maintenance and marital contributions. When the room finally went quiet, Sarah didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She simply pulled a thick, blue-stamped document from her folder and slid it across the table. "We've reviewed your petition, Mr. Henderson," Sarah said, her voice smooth as silk. "However, there's a significant misunderstanding regarding the assets. The Vermont property Mr. Sterling inherited, the one you've based your entire settlement strategy on, is no longer part of his personal estate. It was moved into the Sterling Family Medical Trust nearly a month ago. It is an irrevocable trust designed for the long-term care of Mr. Sterling's sister. It is legally unreachable in a divorce proceeding." Vanessa's tapping stopped. The silence that followed was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. Henderson's face turned a mottled shade of red as he scrambled through the documents. He looked at Vanessa, and for the first time I saw a flicker of genuine fear in her eyes. But Sarah wasn't done. She opened a second folder. "And furthermore," she continued, "we have the digital trail of the $150,000 Mrs. Sterling diverted from the joint savings account over the last 18 months. We have the routing numbers to the offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Under Illinois law, this is a clear case of dissipation of marital assets. Not only is Vanessa not getting the Vermont land, but she is also legally obligated to pay back every cent she took, plus interest, out of her remaining share of the house equity." Vanessa looked toward the back of the room. Julian Thorne was sitting in a lounge chair, acting as an observer. The moment the words offshore account and dissipation were uttered, I watched his posture change. He wasn't looking at Vanessa with love or support. He was looking at her like a bad investment. Oh, he was a man who hated losing money more than he hated anything else. He realized his inside track to the Vermont development was gone, and the woman he'd chosen was now a legal liability. "Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in Mark's story and share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Vanessa deserves to lose everything, or is Mark being too cold?" The weeks following the deposition were a masterclass in slow-motion collapse. With the Vermont land protected and her stolen funds exposed, Vanessa's leverage was non-existent. But I had one more move to make, the killing blow that would ensure she and Thorne never bothered me again. As an architect, I had deep ties to the zoning boards in the Pacific Northwest, from where Thorne was planning his high-rise initiative. I knew his entire empire was built on a house of cards, depending on a specific environmental permit for a coastal project. I quietly submitted a detailed architectural analysis to the board, highlighting the structural risks of building on such unstable ground. Risks Thorne had intentionally ignored in his blueprints. The board didn't just delay the project, they pulled the permits entirely. Thorne lost $40 million in projected revenue overnight. He didn't just dump Vanessa, he blamed her for the distraction that led to his downfall. The final divorce decree was signed in a drab office, a far cry from the luxury we once shared. Vanessa walked out with nothing but her personal belongings and a debt she would be paying off for the next decade. She lost the Oak Park house to cover the settlement. I watched from a distance as she moved into a cramped, noisy apartment in a part of Chicago she used to look down on. The power couple was dead. I didn't feel a surge of joy. I felt a profound sense of relief. I had spent so long defending myself against a woman who was supposed to be my partner that I had forgotten what it felt like to just breathe. I sold the Oak Park house, the Museum of Lies, and distributed the furniture to local charities. I didn't want a single thing that reminded me of the life we'd built on sand. About 6 months later, I was in a coffee shop near Millennium Park, waiting for a meeting with a new client. I saw her. Vanessa was standing in line looking haggard. The designer coats were gone, replaced by a generic blazer that didn't quite fit right. Why, she looked at me, and for a second I saw the old Vanessa, the one I had loved before the greed took over. "How did you do it, Mark?" she asked, her voice trembling. "How did you know everything before I even did?" I took a slow sip of my coffee, looking out at the city skyline. A skyline I was now helping to reshape on my own terms. I knew because I was paying attention, Vanessa. You were so busy looking at the next big thing that you forgot to look at the man standing right in front of you. I didn't beat you. You beat yourself. I decided I was done with the Midwest. I needed a landscape that matched my new outlook on life, something rugged, honest, and vast. I moved to the outskirts of Seattle, buying a piece of land that sat right on the edge of the Sound. I built a cabin there, not a mansion, but a home. I started my own boutique firm, focusing on projects that integrated with nature rather than trying to conquer it. I spent my mornings hiking through the fog-heavy forests and my evenings sitting by a fire that I built myself. I wasn't the senior architect anymore. I was just Mark, and for the first time in my life, that was enough. If you were in Mark's shoes, facing a situation like this, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments below. People often ask me if I regret the 10 years I spent with Vanessa. I tell them no. Those 10 years were the most expensive education I ever received, but the lessons were worth every penny. I learned that you can't build a stable life on an unstable foundation. I learned that family secrets are often just the truth waiting for the right moment to be told. Vanessa wanted a life of luxury built on the backs of others. I wanted a life of integrity, even if it meant starting over from scratch at 45. The revenge wasn't in the money I saved or the permits I blocked. The revenge was in the fact that I survived her and I came out the other side a better man. As I sit here today watching the sun set over the Puget Sound, I think about that smile I gave her on the night she handed me those papers. It wasn't a smile of hate. It was the smile of a prisoner who had just seen the cell door swing open. Life has a funny way of leveling the playing field. Vanessa is still in that city, chasing a ghost of a life she'll never have again. And I am here, building something real. Thank you for walking through this journey with us on Family Secrets and Revenge. Your support means the world, and it's why we keep telling these stories of justice and truth. If this story touched you, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and share your overall thoughts on Mark's journey in the comments. Did he go too far, or was it the perfect revenge? We want to hear from you. Until next time, keep your eyes open